Welcome to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons, helping you boost your health, energy, and productivity.
Hi there, and welcome to another episode of the Thrive TV show. My name is Lauren Parsons. I'm your host, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Suzi McAlpine, who's just brought out her amazing book, Beyond Burnout. Suzi, so nice to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me on the program, Lauren. It's great to be here.
And I can't wait to share this with all of you, and just want to start up front by just sharing how generous Suzi is as well, because not only did she send me a signed copy of her book, she sent me another one, which is going to be up for grabs. So thanks for watching. Make sure that you leave a comment below to be in to win a copy of that book. So today we're talking about Beyond Burnout, of course, and we're going to share what burnout is, the 3 red flags that tell us someone may be suffering from burnout. We're going to look at the causes of burnout, and some of them just might surprise you. And we'll look at what are the 4 strategies that you can apply at an organisational, leadership and an individual level to spot burnout, to stop it and stamp it out. So before we get into all of that, I just want to ask you my quick fire this and that question, Suzi. Are you ready?
As ready as I'll ever be. Go for it.
Okay, so the first one is jeans or skirt?
Jeans.
Jeans, nice. Makeup or no makeup?
Ooh, makeup.
Okay, nice. Photograph or painting?
Oh, painting. My father was an artist. I love art. I couldn't live without paintings.
Nice, beautiful. Smoothie or ice cream?
Right now, under lockdown, I go ice cream.
Nice, yes. Would you rather play 10 different instruments beautifully or speak 10 different languages fluently?
10 different languages, I think, would be my choice. Yep.
Yeah, me too. Nice. Taj Mahal or Eiffel Tower?
Ooh, I've been to the Eiffel Tower, so I'm going to say Taj Mahal.
Okay, nice. Snow or rain?
Rain. Interestingly, I heard a word the other day called petrichor, which describes the smell of rain on the pavement, and I think that's a great word. So yeah, I'm going to choose rain.
Nice, lovely. And last one, cake or cookies?
Oh, cookies with a big glass of milk. So cliched, right? But once again, lockdown. Both. Can I say both? And lockdown.
Yes. Yeah, so we are recording this within the latest resurgence lockdown in New Zealand. So whenever you're watching this, sending love out to everyone, whatever's going on in your world right now. So just to tell you a bit more about Suzi, she's an executive coach, a self-confessed leadership geek, and author of the best-selling book Beyond Burnout and the award-winning leadership blog, The Leader's Digest. Suzi's been featured in Forbes Magazine, RNZ, Sunday Program, the New Zealand Herald, Next Magazine, Sunday Star Times, and is a regular keynote speaker on leadership. So it's such a pleasure to have this time with you today, Suzi. So tell me a bit about burnout and why is it such a challenge?
Well, I think it's been a growing problem. When I first started researching for the book 4 years ago, I had noticed an increase in highly stressed and burnt out individuals and leaders and the people that I was coaching. But also when I looked into the research, and this was pre-COVID times, it was on the rise. And so I was really curious about that. I had experienced burnout myself, although at the time, many years ago, I didn't recognize it as such. And I think when you think about, there's a whole lot of reasons why burnout is on the increase. What I think is really good news is that we are starting to pay attention to burnout, not only its costs for individuals and employees, but also the pretty significant costs to organisations as well. And so but it's still a word that is misunderstood. I think it's become part of our workplace vernacular. We say, oh gosh, I'm so burnt out from that week from hell, when true burnout is far more malevolent, it's more insidious. And so part of the reason why I wrote the book was that I wanted to bring a spotlight to understand what is burnout versus stress, and what we can do to prevent it in our organisations.
Fantastic. And I know you talk about the 3 red flags to burnout, in your book as well. And I'm going to just refer to a few things in the book today. But yeah, can you just share with me a bit about these 3 red flags to look out for?
Absolutely. And I think it's really good to preface it that stress in and of itself isn't a bad thing. We tend to demonize stress, but a certain amount of stress is actually really good for our performance and our well-being. It's when that stress becomes chronic, extreme, it's sort of the duration and the intensity of the stress. It becomes really extreme and is what I call baked into the role. That's when you're more likely to get burnout. So there are 3 red flags or symptoms of burnout, which have been coined by world experts Christina Maslach and Michael Leiter. The first one is chronic exhaustion. So this is when you're completely fatigued, you're devoid of motivation. It's when the batteries won't recharge. You lose that bounce back factor. And in fact, one of the watch outs for burnout is that you go on holiday or you take a break and you come back just as exhausted. So that's the first red flag, and that can show up cognitively, physically, and mentally. So it's that chronic exhaustion. The second red flag is increased cynicism or depersonalization. When you become increasingly frustrated and cynical, you become really detached. I talk about my own experience of that detachment and depersonalization. It's when things that didn't used to bother you really get under your skin, and your ability to really cope is tested. So it's that increased cynicism and or depersonalization. And you can imagine this has some pretty big impacts for those in, for example, caregiving. So you have teaching profession, the medical profession, but even if you are not in those environments, it's like you just feel like you're detached from your work. You can't get involved. The third red flag is reduced professional efficacy. So this is like when you feel helpless, hopeless, nothing I do is making a difference. And it's that feeling of I used to be able to perform or get ahead in this particular job or this role or this task, and I just can't. I interviewed somebody for the book who said it's a bit like running a marathon in molasses, and I thought that was a really good metaphor. So 3 red flags: chronic exhaustion, cynicism or depersonalization, and reduced professional efficacy. They're the sort of red flags that you want to keep an eye out for, particularly if all 3 of them are present at once.
Exactly, yeah, because I think a lot of people just think of burnout as being physical exhaustion, and they don't perhaps understand that threefold, those 3 levels to it. And I was actually recently just working with a client, and it was that depersonalization, that cynicism, and that this client, she was finding it particularly difficult to grapple with that in herself. She said, I just come to work and I just don't want to be there, and I don't want to tell anyone, I don't want to admit that, but I just don't want to be there. I don't want to be nice to people. She was just really grappling with that. And so, I mean, I'm not trying to diagnose burnout for her, but I just mentioned those 3 keys, and she wasn't aware of that one around the cynicism coming in. And so I think that was really a big part of what she may have been facing.
Yeah, I really feel for it, because it can be quite a distressing experience or feeling. For me, I had always been, almost Pollyanna-ish in my sense of optimism and what is possible. And when I was experiencing burnout, that just vanished. And that in itself was quite distressing. One of the biggest myths that I come across when in the research and that I dispel in the research is that you have to be a non-performer, that burnout strikes the non-performers, those who are not passionate or engaged, and that you somehow are mentally weak if you experience burnout. Well, the research shows us unequivocally that that's not the case. In fact, sometimes it's your highest performers, your most passionate people who are most at risk of experiencing burnout. So I feel for your client, because it can be distressing going, hang on, what's happening to me? This is not like me. I've been passionate about my profession or my work, and I'm just not feeling that anymore.
Exactly. And I'm glad you touched on those myths, because I found that really interesting as well, seeing those myths, those 2 that you just mentioned, that that it's someone is weak, or perhaps they're a poor performer, or they can't hack it to actually experience burnout, or that it's somebody not actually putting in enough effort. Whereas when you really think about it in the way that you describe it in the book, it makes complete sense that it's your top performers, it's your people that just relentlessly are always on go, go, go mode that will burn themselves out, that, you know, leads to a negative, not just for them, but for the organisation. I also really enjoyed, the biggest analogy I enjoyed from the book was the fish analogy that you have, and that myth about it all being about the person and not about the workplace. So just tell us a bit about that fishbowl analogy.
Yes. So when I first started researching the book, the internet was absolutely awash with awash with articles about burnout for the individual. You know, what to do to stop it, how to recover. And at first, this kind of annoyed me a little bit, and I wasn't sure why. But the more I looked into the research and the 6 causes of burnout, which we'll go into in a little while, the more it became apparent that leadership is an organisational issue, not an individual issue. And by treating it as an individual issue, it's a bit like treating the sick fish when it's the water that's contaminated. And that also has the semblance of blaming the sick fish for getting burnt out in the workplace, when what we do know is that burnout is very much part of the ecosystem, the culture, the leadership practices of an organisation. These are by far the biggest drivers of whether someone's going to experience burnout or not.
Absolutely. And I think this fishbowl analogy, you know, that you picture, you have somebody that's in the fishbowl and they end up having to take a break to get well again. If you take that recovered fish and you put them back in that same toxic water, as you mentioned, it's, you know, it's going to happen again, isn't it? So I love that the book's really focused on that leadership level. We're very, you know, speaking the same language, I think, around that, because it's leaders' ability to set, you know, how do they demonstrate the way that things should be done or not done? What are the things that they tolerate, that they walk past, that they allow to perpetuate, that actually may be affecting their top performers and undermining not just their health and their well-being, but everything they do.
Oh, absolutely, Lauren. I just was so excited to hear about the work that you're doing, and I felt a real empathy, because we're both looking at leadership and burnout together. You can't really have a conversation about burnout without having a conversation around leadership. And increasingly, you know, leadership is coming under the microscope when we talk about burnout, and with good reason, because what the research shows us is that leadership practices can either prevent burnout or at least largely reduce it. If you have a really good working relationship with your direct manager, and that direct manager has some real competencies in the way that they lead, the research shows that you're actually going to be less likely to experience burnout. But conversely, you know, if you have poor leadership practices, then that's going to increase your chances of burnout too. So yeah, I'm fangirling all over the place in terms of that, of the work that you're doing.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I appreciate that. And what I loved was how much research was in your book as well. And I was just reflecting on some of it this morning, that COGO Workplace Wellbeing Survey from 2020 showed that being able to open up and talk about stress at work actually made people less likely to take stress leave. Now that's amazing, isn't it? But being able to talk about stress means that only 19% of people take stress leave as opposed to 34%. Lots of other stats there that they're less likely to show signs of exhaustion, signs of depersonalization, and signs of low engagement, that when people are able to talk about how they're feeling at work. So it's that whole human leadership, isn't it? And being able to create an environment where people are aware of each other's mental well-being and actually supporting each other.
Absolutely. And look, unfortunately, burnout, like a lot of mental distress in the workplace, is still shrouded in stigma. You know, I think what's that quote Brene Brown said, shame never drives positive behaviour. And I think this is where leaders must take the lead and model what they want to see in the rest of their organisation, and start to really model open conversations around mental wellness and mental distress in the workplace, and create those teams of trust where people feel that it's not a career limiting move to stick their hand up and say, look, actually I'm feeling a bit overwhelmed here, and to have those sort of safe conversations in our workplace, because we know, just as you say, that if people can do that, the outcomes for both the organisation and the individual are going to be better.
Absolutely. And I think that, I know that's one of your key 4 strategies, is destigmatize, isn't it? So let's just back up again, because you referred to, or you alluded to, these six key causes of burnout. So do you want to go through those? I'm sure that people listening in will be thinking, okay, what am I looking out for? What are these causes?
Yeah. So the first one that most people think about when they think about what causes burnout is overwork. And you'd be right. But there are 5 others which may surprise you. So when you think about what causes overwork, it can be, it leads to longer hours. So working excessive hours. It can be not having the resources that are required to do the job, that you've been charged with. So overwork is the first one. The second one is insufficient reward. So most people jump straight to financial reward, but it can be intrinsic awards. Am I valued? Does my boss say thank you? And do I feel like what I'm doing is matter? So when we're talking about insufficient reward, it's really that question, am I getting out from my professional life what I'm putting in, that set of scales, if you like?
Yeah, and I think that's one of those key things we know that as a leader we can make a huge impact on by just putting our antennae up to catch people doing things right and give that immediate specific praise.
Absolutely. It's absolutely bravo. That's exactly what we're talking about. So making people feel very valued and connecting what they do with the strategy of the organization. So people know that what they're doing is making a real difference. And just, sometimes it can be just as simple as saying, yesterday when you did that, it had a huge impact. Thank you so much. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Not a big deal. But so that's the second one. The third cause of burnout is isolation. So this is perceived sense of isolation can be caused from anything like microaggressions due to race or gender, excessive politics or unresolved conflict in the workplace. It can be a sense of lack of psychological safety in in a team or in an organisation, and this is why I talk a lot about building trust being your first priority as a leader. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yes.
The fourth is an absence of fairness. So as humans, we are finely attuned to whether something is fair or not, and it's no different in the workplace. So it can be things like perks, prestige, pay, promotion, even whether someone's voice is being heard in a meeting. So an absence of fairness can be a cause of burnout. A lack of control, and this is a really big one. People need to have some form of control over the how. So often we will say, here's the what of the work, but it's equally important, important for leaders to involve people in the how and the why of their work. And so if there's a real lack of control in a workplace in terms of how you perform the work, that can also be a contributor to burnout. Of course, you put all of those 6 causes together and you've got a perfect burnout storm. Absolutely, so I think it's really important for us not just to think it's overwork. There are some of these other causes which can cause burnout.
And I think my mind jumps immediately to, so what are leaders doing, that obviously can increase that or relieve that, obviously micromanaging people and taking away their sense of control continually makes them second guess themselves or feel stifled. I really agree as well around that sense of isolation. It's interesting because I do a lot of work using the emotional culture deck. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, created by Jeremy Dean.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and virtually every team that I work with, the word connected is how people deeply, deeply want to feel connected and appreciated, which links back to that lack of rewards, that people just really need to feel connected to their colleagues, connected and welcome, and they need to feel appreciated for what they do, and not just monetarily, but in that being recognised and feeling like, oh, what I do actually matters.
Yeah, so I know I'm not supposed to interview you, but I'm so curious. What have you found have been some of the strategies for building connection that you've seen in your work and through things like the emotional, because sometimes I think it's small things. So, what have you found?
Well, yeah, again, there's so many different things that you can do. And I think that actually adding in rituals is really meaningful. I think we've lost a lot of rituals in life. So, for example, at every team meeting, having just a 2-minute or a 5-minute, some sort of activity where everyone has a chance to check in and go around. And so it might be, you have a question of the week. It might be, hey, what's the greatest book you've read lately? Or it might be, what's something that you're learning? Or it can just be really fun things. I think often we picture that social team connection is going out for drinks on a Friday night, which often doesn't necessarily lead to inclusive behaviour. It doesn't suit everyone. It's not always that positive in terms of our well-being. So I'm not saying don't do that. Yes, you can do that sometimes, but what are ways that you can actually get people connected in different ways? At the moment, there's, so many people having to do a lot of online meetings, and I think that will continue. And actually there's lots of really fun ways to make your Zoom meetings really engaging. One thing I love to do at the start of my leadership sessions, group sessions, is play a game, a treasure hunt game, and it's just like, hey, find something yellow. So you hold up something yellow, find something blue, find something sharp, find something that's meaningful to you. And I love that question because people bring up photos or their taonga or something that's special to them, and so everyone just gets to know each other in a little way.
A little bit better.
So, yeah, I mean, I could probably go on for hours on different things, but I think it is so key to strategize what are the rituals and the habits that we can create in the workplace to keep people feeling connected in whatever way is meaningful for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it talks a bit about what I'm going to dive into. One of the strategies that I talk about in the book, which is Socialize, is, what I notice is we're having lots of what are we doing conversations in our workplaces. And that's really important. Task focused, what are we doing? Action oriented conversations are necessary because otherwise nothing's going to get done. But I think there is an opportunity for us to have how are we going conversations. And each team and each organization is going to have its own culture about what's going to work for you. There are so many different opportunities to adapt that how are we going conversation to something that's going to suit your culture. One team that I work with just has a, what's between, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your wellness, that they, that they either talk about as a group or even in one-on-one meetings. So I think you need to adapt it to suit your own style and your own culture, but I don't think there's any opportunity, excuse for us not to build in how are we going conversations as well as what are we doing conversations.
Absolutely. And that links again perfectly in with the emotional culture deck work, which I do as well, because if you come to a meeting and you don't give people a chance to check in on how they're actually doing, you can have people in the room and some have got their tank full and some have got their tank empty, and just taking 2 minutes to go around and check in. It might be, what's one word, how you're feeling right now? Something I used to do at the end of my netball games with my netball team when I was coaching, how are you feeling right now? And it's just great for everyone to share that. And it's surprising what comes out sometimes. But if you could do that at the start of your meeting before you get into the business as usual, then it gives you time to actually check in. And if someone is going through some mental distress, then obviously you can deal with that one-on-one, in a more private way. But it just gives you a way to check in and hear how everyone's doing. And then also, I think positive intention setting, maybe at the end of your meeting, to say, okay, how am I going to feel? How do you want to feel today? How are you going to show up today? Oh, I'm going to be curious. I'm going to be open-minded. I want to feel at ease or feel joy. Yeah, so absolutely. So tell me more about some of these strategies. I know that you've got them organized into these 4 different sections in your book. For leaders that are listening in, what are the key things that they can start doing as strategies to help prevent burnout?
So when I was writing the book, I came up with destigmatize and organize. And then I thought, maybe after a wine or two, I thought, I need to come up with 2 more I's, which actually work quite well. So the 4 strategies which I talk about in the book is recognize, destigmatize, socialize, and organize. And these 4 strategies can be applied at an organizational level, they can be applied at a leadership level, and as an individual in an organization, you can apply it as an individual. So the first one is pretty obvious. We need to get better at recognizing the symptoms of burnout, those 3 red flags in ourselves and in our colleagues. And so I think if we can start to be more aware about mental health in the workplace, and the well-being, I think that's going to help. As I mentioned, destigmatize, and this mainly ends with and begins with leadership. I think a lot of leaders underestimate the shadow they cast. When they whisper, it comes out like a shout. And so I think leaders need to take the lead here when it talks about when it comes to destigmatizing mental distress and burnout in the workplace. If you look at someone like Craig Hudson, the chief executive of Xero. Now, this was about his battle with depression, but when leaders come out and speak openly and have the courage to be vulnerable about their own experiences, it kind of sends a message that it's safe for other people to do it. And it also means that we're not turning it into an other. It's an other problem. It's so much of a we problem. So I think there are some strategies, just what we talked about, having, making mental wellness conversations part of our workplace operating rhythms.
Yeah.
The third
and just
thing,
to add to that,
yes,
add into that as well, because there's another great episode of Thrive TV. If you're wanting to find out more about destigmatizing, encourage you to check out Jason Finucane's interview. He's a friend of mine from Canada, and he's on this mission to create Stigma Zero, and he shares his amazing story about how he both experienced a really serious heart condition and got treatment and got better, and then he also went through a mental health condition of being diagnosed bipolar, but how it was so different because it was such a different path to navigate, to get treatment, to talk about it. People didn't know how to treat him. And yet, if you broke your arm, you would go and get a cast and people would sign it for you and it would get better, and then you'd carry on. And so he's on a real mission to destigmatize mental health, because we know that people can get treatment and recover and be back to being fully contributing members of the team. And we want to help people on that journey. And I think, like you say, leaders being able to step up and be vulnerable and share their story is a great start to open those conversations.
The other thing that I think we can do around not only the socialize and destigmatize strategies is to improve your listening and coaching skills as a leader. How often do we say, hi, how are you going? And then, we walk off. We're not really fully present. And so some of those really basic but really fundamental leadership skills, such as active listening, improving your coaching skills, these sort of having more coaching conversations, and these can be, you can have a great coaching conversation in 5 minutes. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It's not more, it's just a different way of leading. And the other thing I would say when we talk about the socialize strategy, so this is about being purposeful at building social connection. And I think people are hardwired to connect. We've talked a little bit about that, so I won't go into, some of the strategies, but I think certainly stamping out destructive workplace politics and bullying should be really, really paramount. And I think that needs to be addressed right from the top table, from an executive leadership team, because, that can be like lighter fuel for burnout.
So how do they do that? What are the, sorry, I just want to dig deeper into that, because that really, I think, will pique people's interest. As a leader, how do you stamp out that bullying, those negative behaviours?
I think that there are a lot of strategies, and I'm not an expert on workplace bullying and politics, so I think that probably there will be other people who will know more about this. But what I can say is, one, it has to start at the top table. So you need to have, a really good, psychologically safe, trusting executive leadership team. So work at the top table, because everything that you do there will be seen by the rest of the organisation. And if you're not modelling what you want to see others do, that's going to be really difficult. But I think there should be very well publicised structures and processes. One of the things is to have a process if someone feels that there is bullying in the workplace that is safe and anonymous, and to have, start to look at your policies and systems and processes around that topic, and make sure that those are best practices for a start. And of course, if there is that, you need to measure it. We need to measure that level of presence through things like you can get surveys, culture surveys, those sorts of things. So that's just a couple of things. But I would say leadership starts in the mirror. So the first thing you need to do as a leader is to increase your self-awareness. And I think that means looking at both your weaknesses and being really open about your weaknesses and your work-ons, and as well as your strengths.
Yeah, great. Really great. More strategies. Sorry, you're going to lead into another one.
That's right. The fourth strategy is organize. So what we do know is that if we do not get real clear around our priorities in an organisation, that can lead to overwork and a lack of control. So what I would say is improve your delegation skills, your prioritising skills. I was working with a leadership team the other day, and they said, oh, here are our 15 priorities for the organisation. And I said, well, that makes an oxymoron of the word.
Yeah.
So, what are you going to ditch, delegate and delay? What are you saying no to in an organisation? If you're taking on a major initiative that is company-wide, don't look at it in isolation. Ask what else we've got going on. But also, once again, look at the way in which, providing people a say in the way in which they have their work and involve them as much as possible. Certainly you can get better at prioritising, and that can be at a leadership level as well as an individual level. So, I go into a lot more detail in the book, the old urgent and important matrix, the time matrix. Yes. There are all sorts of strategies, but I think prioritisation, providing clarity when you're communicating tasks is so simple. All of these are common sense, but common sense ain't so common in lots of cases. So.
Yeah, and like you say, it's those key leadership skills, aren't they, of being able to delegate, or clearly articulating. I know one exercise that I've heard of that can be really powerful is if you were to say what were the top 5 keys for all of your direct reports in their roles, and to jot those down, and then to ask them what do they believe are their top 5.
I love that.
See how aligned those things are. And often, the top 2 or 3 usually would be pretty well aligned, but then sometimes there's a third and a fourth one that are just not quite on target. And so the more that you can have those regular one-on-ones, which I know again is something that you talk about in here, is how to have those great regular effective one-on-ones, which I'm a huge fan of, is I think you get better alignment, and the better alignment and clarity that we have for people, the more that they know, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm doing it well, and it's making a difference, which feeds into that sense of contributing as well.
Yeah, no, I love that strategy. So as you say, a lot of these are what I would call fundamental leadership skills, but I think that there is an opportunity in a lot of places to really upskill our leaders in, a lot of people say, oh, I can delegate, but often when you look at, the 5 steps of delegation, most people are missing some of those when they actually delegate work. Delegation isn't just dumping something and then running, or micromanaging. So I think those are some of those. So recognize, destigmatize, socialize and organize are the 4 strategies which I go into the book.
Great. And I love what you mentioned about, we have 15 priorities, and that's actually an oxymoron. It just reminded me, my husband, who's based in the military, he often says to me, right, what's your main effort? Because that's a military term that they have, what's your main effort? And I'm like, well, it's this and this. And then he'll ask me again, so what is your main effort? And it's okay to have supporting efforts, but really know what is the main effort, and then what are the supporting efforts. And once we ask ourselves those questions and actually reflect on that as leaders, it just shifts the lens of where we put focus, because we know we can't do it all at once. So I think that at an organisational culture level is really critical that you've highlighted that.
Yeah. And there's a great book by Greg McCowan called Essentialism. I don't know if you've read that. And I think he does a great job of enabling people to do the simple but hard task of saying no. And I think that if we can say, no to the kind of important, kind of interesting, I think that's a good start.
Yeah, and I love Stephen Covey's quote that I often share that says that you need to, that one of the keys in life is to be able to say no smilingly, confidently, non-apologetically, and that the best way to do that is to have a bigger yes burning inside. So getting really clear on what is your why, what's your main effort, and then actually being able to let people know they can ditch and delegate and defer. And I think that's been a real blessing from COVID, actually, when we look at the lessons we've learned, because we know that, challenging times build resilience, and that I've kind of been thinking over the last 18 months, what are we learning right now? Can I fast forward 3 years on and think, when I look back, what will I've learned? And I think one of the blessings has been those 3 Ds, ditch, delegate, defer, something we've had to do over and over again, and life is still carried on. And
Absolutely.
actually, it's okay to defer some things, and it's okay to choose not to do some things. Yeah, so interesting.
It really is. And on a personal level, by applying, it would be a bit silly if I wrote a book on burnout and then got burnt out afterwards. That would be a bit ironic. So I'm having to practice a lot of what I preach. And working with my own business coach over the last 18 months, I've started to really put in practice that clarity of purpose, that thematic goal. What is the one singular one most important thing? Or, never having more than 4 things that are my key strategic pillars. And the irony is my business has actually gone forward more, as well as my mental wellness, by applying these. So I think it's something that you can apply at an individual level. But once again, if you're an individual employee, it can be really, you can often go, well, I don't get much choice in that. And certainly leaders will have more power in this. But I certainly think that there are certainly some strategies that we can start to employ at an individual level, regardless of your situation, that might be able to help.
Exactly. And that's being able to, often when I speak and teach on delegation, I talk about being delegated to as well, because people feel like, well, I've just got too many things. And I usually ask the question, do you have more than one person that is delegating things to you? And I really feel for those people in the room that do, because that can be a tricky place to be. When your leader comes in and says, hey, can you get this done? And I need it done by Wednesday, to be able to have the confidence and the skill set to say, yes, I really love to do that for you. I've already got these 15 things on my plate. What would you like me to not do? Or what's your priority? So
absolutely. Yeah. And that's why I actually put a whole section in the book about how to influence up, how to negotiate up. What are some phrases and approaches that you can actually use exactly like that, Lauren, but that you can start to have those conversations, those two-way conversations with your boss. Because a lot of the time, I remember when I was leading a team, sometimes I wasn't across what they already had. And so, you make assumptions about what people have on their plate. So those, it comes down to communication, doesn't it, all the time?
It does. Absolutely. Yeah. Fantastic. Well, Suzi, I know we could talk all day, and it's such a big topic and such a critical one, but I'm glad that we've highlighted those 3 red flags of ongoing exhaustion, that depersonalization, cynicism, feeling like you're lacking in your personal accomplishments and achievements, that we talked about dispelling some of those myths around actually going through burnout doesn't show that you are weak, doesn't show that you're not trying your best to perform. Usually it's actually high performers that suffer from it, and that it's not about the person, it's about that fishbowl and the culture and the environment. And I love your strategies. So obviously, as I say, leave a comment below. What did you get out of the interview today? Love to hear from you to be in to win a copy of the book, so you can learn all about those strategies to recognize, let me see if I can get them now, recognize, destigmatize, socialize, and organize. Yeah. So if people do want to find out more about you, Suzi, or to get in touch, how can they do that?
Probably the best way is through my website, SuziMcAlpine.com. And if you go on there and you're keen to purchase the book, there's actually a page there on Beyond Burnout, which you can buy the book directly from me, or support your local bookstore. It's available in all the bookstores and online in the usual places. So that would be it.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, so lovely to have you on the show, and I just know that this is going to be a wonderful, very popular episode number 50 of the Thrive TV show.
Yes, it's number 50. I feel very privileged. So yay for number 50. Thank you very much. I'm 50. So, 50 on your 50th, Lauren. Congratulations on such an awesome show. And well done, 50 episodes. Pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty thrilling. Yeah, it's been amazing. I just love having these opportunities. I thought rather than writing articles, I'll actually just share some content by interviewing some incredible people. So it's been a really fun journey. So to wrap up, Suzi, just invite you to share, if there was one final thing that you could share with our listeners and viewers today, what would it be?
I would say that, and it's quite timely given right now we're in lockdown, it's not mine, but it's talked about in the book, and it's Stephen Covey's model of working from your circle of control, so that there will always be things that are beyond your circle of control. There'll be some things that will be worrying you, or your circle of concern. As much as possible when it comes to burnout, whether you're a leader, a chief executive, or an individual, is start by working what's within my control in this situation and start from there. So I think that's kind of relevant not only for burnout, but also just in life, really, in general. It's what I've been talking to my daughter about today. So
yeah, exactly. I was just, my eyes were getting distracted then because I was looking down in the book again to find it, but it's actually the exact thing that I shared Tuesday. I happened to be down in Christchurch speaking on resilience to a group, and then of course we heard the news of whispers in the airport lounge of people getting flights home and what was going to happen. And so it was the number one tip that I shared was focus right now on what you can control, because the things outside of our control, the weather, the government's decisions, how other people react, those are all things we can waste a lot of emotional energy around, aren't they? When we could be focusing on things within our control, what we choose to do in the moment. So I love that. That just feels like we come full circle to focus on.
It does.
So,
yeah.
So thank you so much, Suzi. Such a pleasure to have you with me. Thank you to everyone that has been listening in. It's another episode of the Thrive TV show. Go out and thrive.
Thank you for listening to the Thrive TV show with Lauren Parsons. Visit thrivetvshow.com to access the show notes and discover our fantastic bonus content. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next inspiring episode.